Everyone, thank you. If everyone's seated, then we'll get the show on the road. Welcome this morning to our Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting to hear the submissions on the sewerage submissions. Thank you, and I'd like to ask Eugene if you could start our Hui Today meeting this morning with a prayer. Thank you. Rinam, Taiki. Kia ora. Thank you. Thank you. Your Worship, councillors and members of the public, I wonder if we could stand for a moment, for a minute's silence for the police officer who lost his life last week in our country. He isn't of our community, but he is because we have officers here as well. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Person, for asking that of us. It was a very kind thought. Thank you. So welcome to you all this morning. I know that for some councillors this is a new experience for hearings, but you'll find them very interesting. And it's a wonderful opportunity for members of the public to share their thoughts as we go through the submissions, their thoughts on our sewerage plan. Excuse me, I'll just make sure. Now, I do know we do have something a little bit different this morning in terms of we have a councillor who is also a submitter and has made a submission. So I just want to ask you, Councillor McPherson, do you have a conflict of interest in terms of being a councillor? And also, it isn't unusual, well, it is unusual actually. We don't often get a councillor making a submission, but I just wanted to make sure. I have taken some advice on this because I want to make sure that everybody's very clear about the process today. I don't know if you'd like to, I know you did send a view out to all of us. I'm happy for you to state that now. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the Chair. Look, just in brief, I have sought legal advice on this matter and have communicated that advice with a covering letter to Councillor McPherson. And Chair, if I may take a couple of moments to perhaps just step through the issues here. This is a statutory consultation process, so it is a process where the council considers a particular proposal, they deliberate on that proposal, and then provide it to the public and give opportunity to members of the public to express their view back to council as to the directions or the thoughts that they have or the matters that they'd like council to consider. councillors are obliged clearly within that process to listen with an open mind. Councillors in many situations may, over that period, express views as to what their thoughts are, and that is totally in order. But what they are still obliged to ensure is that when they come to the submissions process, they listen with an open mind to submitters. The legal advice points to the fact that if a councillor has got a very clear, definitive view on a particular matter and submits that view to council, the question is, would a reasonable person say that their party would vote according to their submission, or are they open to alternative points of view from other submitters? In the view of the legal advice, if this was tested in a legal arena, it is unlikely to find that that someone would say that this is actually a situation where predetermination is actually likely to occur. In other words, the councillor is likely to vote in the way that they have submitted and unlikely to take another point of view. So that's the risk of predetermination here. The resolution of this is easy, as I think the Chair has alluded. There have been times where councillors have chosen to make submissions, and in those instances what they've chosen to do is to actually step away from the decision-making process to ensure that the conflict is actually not becomes real.
Thank you very much. Well, that's clear. So, thank you. So we're very clear on that. Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question to the Chief Executive through you. So part of the decision-making process, is it not, is the questioning of other submitters?
Well, that would normally be the case, but in this case, I'm not allowing that. I'm not allowing a submitter to sit at the table and then question other submitters. That would be highly inappropriate and totally unfair for the other submitters. So that I will not allow. Yes, Your Worship.
Just a question there too, having read the legal advice that we've got here about the open-mindedness, would the submitter then have to leave the room as well as not take part?
I wouldn't want to enforce that. I wouldn't want to. Normally, I have to say, in the past, the submitter, when we have, has left the table and sat in amongst all the other submitters. I did speak to Councillor McPherson, and he said he'd like to sit at the table, so I'm not going to make a big issue of it. But certainly will not be permitting any questions from Councillor McPherson to other submitters. Yes, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, it's not so much a question, but a comment. I think it's totally inappropriate for a submitter to sit at the
Mr.
table.
Thomas, I'm not going to take any comments. I'm going to move on to our hearings. It has been fully explained to us this morning about the processes. Certainly I'm clear about what my role is, and so this is not up for discussion. So thank you. So good morning and welcome again to everyone. Excuse me. Now, please don't forget our mobiles. If you could just turn them off, and I will make sure that we get a break from time to time. So that's our phones off the thing. And thank you this morning, Mr. Kemp, for your karakia this morning. I do have two apologies. Miss Marks is an apology, and Councillor Bentley was here, and he's had to leave now. So may I have a mover and a seconder, please, for our apologies? Thank you. Ms. Yates, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Berryman Kemp. I'll put all those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Declarations of interest, excuse me. Thank you. No declarations of interest. I think we're just going to go straight into the hearings and we've probably got a good 3 hours ahead of us. So, and as you know, each submitter has 10 minutes. Whether they choose to use all of the 10 minutes speaking to their submission, we have got them, we have read them. If they wish to use all of their 10 minutes and speak to their submission, or if they would like to leave some minutes, 1 or 2 or whatever, for questions, I'm happy for that. But that will be the process this morning. So our first submitter is Mr. Kevin Winters. Good morning, Kevin. Nice to see you again. Welcome.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair, councillors, Your Worship, staff, good morning. I come to you with a heavy heart today, having to speak to this submission. But first of all, before I get into the body of it, I'm probably going to take more than 10 minutes, Madam Chair. I come to you with 4 sort of caveats. First one is, I'm here as a private individual. I'm not here on behalf of Bay Plenty Regional Council. I've taken that hat off, it's gone outside. Regional Council do not know what I'm about to say today. They know I'm here, but I just want to make sure that I'm a private citizen and it's nothing to do with Regional Council. I also, since 2013, I've stayed away from this organisation in terms of my opinion, but there's some things I just cannot let go. And this is one of them today, hence I'm here, because I feel very strongly about this, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and it's quite obvious, but you will actually have 10 minutes, no longer. Thank you.
So, the third point is I fully support the upgrade of the wastewater treatment plant through that, the upgrade to the full MBR UV8 status. That is not in question today, but I fully support that. So I've got a sort of a 12-point plan, and first one is timing. I find it incredibly short timeframes that this statement of proposal has been out. This document was signed by Leon, the auditor, on the 17th of, we had 18 working days. He signed it off on the 19th of May. We had submissions by the 17th of June. I find that an incredibly short time frame to complete a detailed study. And actually, it's really short on details. There's not a lot of facts in this statement of proposal to have an informed decision. Secondly, the format of the evenings the other night was a bit of a farce because I wanted to be in 2 places at once. I wanted to be in the annual plans hearing, but I was forced to choose between the annual plans hearing and the wastewater treatment plant. I found that format totally unacceptable. Thirdly, this is the biggest decision that this council is going to make. A $156 million contract over 10 years. This is the biggest decision you have to make. And to have it in this statement of proposal through a special consultative process, this is more akin to a long-term plan. And quite frankly, I don't think it's the right time, and I don't know what the rush is to get this done and dusted. The third party trilogy is here for one reason and one reason only, and that's profit. I found it really interesting that your question and answer session that was given out on the night, people were asked, who is Trilogy? And the comment was, they are connected to Beijing Water Enterprises Group. Why don't you be honest and say they are owned by a Hong Kong-based Beijing Enterprises Water Group? To find out that they are connected, they're more than connected, they're owned by Trilogy, Beijing. Can I just, I did a bit of a desktop analysis, Madam Chair, in terms of depreciation, because I wanted to know how this council's been performing. So I did a desktop analysis of your depreciation in the last 5 annual reports. And I'm quite happy to be proved wrong. And councillors, you need to ask these questions of your staff. Prove me wrong. But from 2015 and 16 through to about 2018-19, you've spent just on, it's about 12 million in depreciation, on renewals. But you're actually rating about 5.5 to 6 million a year in depreciation. So that means you're not spending that depreciation money on the renewals. And in fact, in 3 years, from 15, 16, 16, 17, 17, 18, you spent 6 million on renewals, but you collected 18 million in depreciation. Ballpark figure, but prove me wrong. Depreciation can be used in 4 ways according to LGA. You can pay back debt, you can put it into reserves, You can buy new assets or you spend it on the asset. I couldn't find any reserves where that money's gone. Prove me wrong, but I need to know that. You're using, so this is point number 6, you're using an ageing workforce as a reason to go to Trilogy. I find that an admission of poor succession planning, actually. Why don't you become a little bit proactive and start saying, let's employ or create scholarships for the young men and women of Rotorua to go and do engineering degrees, be it civil, mechanical, chemical, and bond them to come back here in 5 years' time. I think that you would be applauded by the public for doing that. Seventh point, the statement of proposal is really biased. You know, option 1 is 7 pages, option 2 is 3 pages, and option 3 is 1 page. There's an unconscious bias in this report to steer you to option 1. The language is directing you to option 1. I found the critiquing of this article to be poor in terms of the other options. And as I said, there's no real facts in this as well. One of your staff members said to me, oh, but RDC tenders out roading contracts. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. But that's part of receiving the far rate from the Crown, that you must tender out those contracts. If a road breaks up or there's a pothole, who do the public call? They don't call the contractor, they call council. So by using Trilogy, you're actually not going to devolve yourself of the responsibility of doing the repairs. And I come back to the adage, if it looks good, too good to be true, it probably is. Because I don't see the value in this document going to Trilogy when it can be done in-house, as it's been done for a long time. You also mentioned in this Q&A that Fulton Hogan would be, Trilogy would be supported by Fulton Hogan through the operations and monitoring. Well, why not cut out the middleman and go straight to Fulton Hogan to do that work for you? 10th point is you have to retain suitable qualified staff to check the checkers. I just believe that this is going to be one big dispute clause and it'll end up in the court. Because if Trilogy don't perform, you're going to have to prove them wrong and they've got the horsepower to just take this to court. 11th point, you're using Rotorua as an excuse. My goodness, the thing's not even operational yet and you're using it for cost overruns. I just find that inexcusable that you're using that as an excuse as well. And my 12th point, Madam Chair, is here's the kicker. Here's the kicker. I went on Trilogy's website. They design, build and operate wastewater treatment plants all around the world. Currently in New Zealand, they're at Kaipara District Council. That's the laughing stock of design, build and operate in New Zealand in terms of getting it horribly wrong. But here's the kicker. You know you're going to have vendor lock-in if you get Trilogy to support your wastewater treatment plant, because they're not going to let any other contractor come in and get a look-in when you put this $65 million upgrade out for us. So in summary, this is the biggest decision you're going to make. As far as I'm concerned, there's far too many risks. There's too many unanswered questions. This audit report that you got from Leon just says that you've done the process right. He doesn't give a view on the process, but quite frankly, I think it's horribly the wrong decision. There are too many unintended consequences. You'll have to have check the checkers. It can be done in-house. This is your core business. And quite frankly, I think you should delay this decision until the Environment Court hearing has been made on your discharge options for the wastewater treatment plant anyway. Because if you don't, there's going to be a huge variation of contract if you don't get the opportunity to put it into the lake, and they will charge like wounded bulls in terms of what if you're going to have alternative options. So you've said you're going to delay the upgrade of the wastewater treatment plant for 5 years. I think this decision can wait for the Environment Court hearing. and I've done it in less than 10 minutes, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kevin. So our next submitter this morning, thank you. Mr. Pakes, John Pakes.
Chair, sorry, I have to leave. I've got to go back over to Regional Council headquarters to zoom into our annual plan hearing, annual plan meeting now. So I have to.
Thank you for taking the time this morning to come along. Thank you, Kevin. Good morning, Mr. Pakes. Nice to see you again. Welcome. You're familiar with the 10 minutes, with the process, Mr. Pakes, so thank you.
I don't get any money back though. No. Okay. Okay. Good morning, councillors. I thank you for allowing me to give you this submission this morning. To be able to address council is a privilege, and I appreciate it. I know nothing about wastewater systems. My submission will be quite broad. To borrow from your statement of proposal, your job is to provide a safe, reliable and cost-effective operation of our wastewater network. On top of allowing for the increased growth of our city, you need to confront the demands of your people, that you will meet increased levels of network operations reliability, achieve higher effluent treatment quality and improved wastewater network resilience standards. I borrow those words from you. Above all of that, Rotorua has a unique responsibility. We have the taonga of our lakes that we must protect. The lakes must be helped to recover from years of neglect. In this challenge, Rotorua is doing well, but I feel we must be doing more. And you have to do all of that while inheriting a system that your own in-house audits indicate to me is not in a fit state of repair, the system. Yeah. You are not to blame for this state of disrepair. The fault lies, I believe, with previous administrations who did not spend enough money in upkeep of our wastewater systems. And perhaps the blame should not lie entirely with those administrations either. Perhaps it should lie with us, the people of Rotorua, who are renowned for complaining about the level of rates that we should be contributing and the affordability of the rates that we should be contributing. And lurking in the background, of course, is central government. Page 6 of your statement introduces the 3 waters strategy. Through this proposal, government is going to set higher standards than what you are used to in the treatment of our wastewater. You will need to meet those standards, and higher standards mean higher costs. As with most things in life, the first thing to worry about is the price. You should not downplay the true cost of your preferred option. If I'm reading your statement correctly, the true cost is measured on page 21, and it is set at 21% increase over last year. That is a lot of money. It is accepted that you have been able to make efficiency savings in other areas of your budgets, but that is a bit like robbing Peter to pay Paul. It is a fact that you will not achieve your long-term targeted rates rise of 3% for this year. So the task before you is challenging. It is possibly one of the biggest challenges that you will need to make in this term, but it is a challenge that you must meet. For the sake of our lakes and for the well-being of our community, you must meet the challenge of upgrading our wastewater systems. I should admit that you should bite the bullet and get on with it. So then how to do it, which is the proposal. Proposal 3 should not be discussed. Many who call themselves ratepayers will beg you to accept that proposal and maintain the status quo. They live in the now and will submit that it is your duty to reduce rates without giving any credence to our younger generations and the problems that their city will face. They will talk of generational debt without giving any recognition to the fact that we are obliged to leave a city to our following generations that is worth living in. Thankfully, our council has witnessed in recent times the arrival of a number of younger elected representatives to sit at this council table. I would ask the older representatives here to listen carefully to their views. So you are left with proposal 1 or 2. The cost for proposal 1 and rates you indicate at $10.88 a week, while that for proposal 2 is $9.89 a week, a difference of $1. So we could deduce that the 21% rise in wastewater costs over last year pretty much applies to them both. So my question is, when I look at it, what will we get for our buck? Both of the proposals are endeavouring to achieve the same for a very similar cost. When the costs are nearly the same, the only analysis left is risk and reward. Both Proposal 1 and Proposal 2 are endeavouring to meet the same standard. Both Proposal 1 and Proposal 2 are starting on the same page. Both Proposal 1 and Proposal 2 have had due diligence conducted on them. The assumption must be, therefore, that Council understands full well the contract that it will get, and that the consortium understands full well the network that it is going to inherit. As I see it, the attraction of Proposal 1 is a fixed cost term. If I am reading it correctly, outside of CCPI increases, which will apply to both Proposals 1 and 2, the cost to me for my wastewater treatment will remain at a fixed cost for the next 10 years. That's the cost to me. For the next 10 years, there will be no surprises, no cost blowouts, no overruns, no excuses from you, my council. I hope that I am reading it right, because that is a very good reward for a buck. So there must be risks. It could be imagined that we, the City of Rotorua, could lose the control of our wastewater system to an outside organisation. To reassure us, on page 8 under Ownership and Control, you state, Council will retain all strategic decision-making, asset ownership responsibilities and service level setting and control for the duration of the contract. You will only be able to achieve this aim if you have a contract that is robust enough to defeat any challenges. You will be dealing with an overseas companies operating under foreign jurisdictions. As a layman, I would expect that your contract will be binding with 3 members of the consortium as a single New Zealand identity, and that any legal challenges will be held under New Zealand jurisdiction alone. You have a performance guarantee bond that is financial. In the community, there is comment that the financial guarantee bond that you have from the consortium will be able to be overridden easily, as, and I quote, the $15 million guarantee in the case of catastrophic system failures can easily be attributed to Council's brackets previous asset ownership and management to be effective. In short, that comment is claiming that the guarantee is not worth the paper that it is written on. This will be a nonsense if your contract is strong enough, and because the consortium has done due diligence on what you own, if it has missed anything, then it is too bad for the consortium, not you. As to the xenophobic fears that are appearing in some circles, in particular in social media, Trility is owned by Beijing Water. Trility is a company registered in Hong Kong, a special conclave used by the CCP in order to conduct business with what are called Western countries. Trility is but a part of the consortium. Trility will be anxious to portray itself as a respectable business partner because Trility is no doubt intent on expanding its business activities throughout the world. It will not wish to appear as a communist bully. To quote from a piece in social media, it states, the point is that Rotorua's residents and ratepayers should not expect the company controlled by the CCP to have the moral commitments that are normally taken for granted and required in our law and our democracy. That statement from some members of the public is nonsense. Rather than a xenophobic fear, we should recognise that through Trility we are gaining the very real benefit of being able to hook in to the international expertise and abilities that Trility will bring to the table. We, the residents of Rotorua, deserve the best. Our association with Trility will help us get this. That the best may come from China should not be a concern. To quote again from your proposal on page 8, you write, There is a need to ensure that Rotorua District can benefit from new technology interventions to ensure improved network reliability. These new technology interventions will come from the expertise of the consortium. A big plus for you, and in particular your engineering staff, is that they will, as individuals, be able to learn and digest the technologies that will flow from the consortium. And they will need to, in order to keep up with what the consortium is doing to our wastewater system. I recommend proposal 1, obviously, but I also would say this: do not downsize your engineering staff under the illusion that someone else may be doing the work. You will need in the future an even more robust engineering workforce, a workforce that has the ability to monitor and control this and your other contracts. The Three Waters direction being undertaken by central government will make the issues far more demanding and complex. You will always need good engineers, and despite some circles suggesting that your staff are being paid too much, you may have to pay more. The success of this contract will always rely on the monitoring ability of your staff. If you do not monitor it carefully, the contract will never deliver the benefits to our city that it deserves from the contract. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Pakes. You were spot on with your timing. Thank you very much. Well rehearsed.
Okay.
But thank you so much for taking the time to appear this morning. Thank you. Mr. Don Atkinson. Good morning, Mr. Atkinson. Welcome.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
Firstly, I'd like to address the, good morning, councillors. Nice to see you all. Madam Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to address the Tarawera situation, and I just should note that I, in actual fact, live on Lake Rotorua, not Tarawera, but the lakes are a part of my passion, and I've spent 20 years through the Lake Water Society being involved in the restoration work that has been done in this district, and I applaud the amount of work that has been done. But here we're focusing on the Tarawera lakes, not the Deed lakes, or Lake Tarawera in particular, and there's been very little done there. The reality is we have seen a slow decline in that lake over a number of years, and that decline is just incremental, gradual but incremental. And the consequence of that now is that we are starting to see the first signs of real degradation. We're getting the odd occasional algae bloom. Tarawera, when Lake Rotorua was bad where I lived, and it was bad, Tarawera was the favoured lake. You could not buy property there unless you paid significant premiums, and the reverse was at Lake Rotorua, where there was numerous properties available and heavy discounting. That situation now, I believe, is completely reversed. And it really is up to council to recognise the consequences of lack of action from both councils, the suppliers, but there is a restoration plan that was agreed to by the strategic group for the Tarawera Lakes, and that number one action in that plan was the sewage scheme for the lakes. Now, to walk away from it for 8 years, I think, is absolutely deplorable in the sense that you make a commitment to a group which includes government, and then to turn your back on that commitment after all of the consultation that has been undertaken, you do yourself an incredible disservice. You ruin a reputation, in my opinion, and you deserve the community to be angry with you. I'm very surprised that a council would effectively lead a community through a process and deliver effectively, or say they're going to deliver something, the funding be put in place for it, and then to pull the rug from underneath it. I'm absolutely astounded that you are even promoting or proposing this. So we've seen bacterial analysis of the water over the summer periods. It's not even portable where people are taking their water from. You know that. You've got a responsibility in respect to portable water. How can you walk away for that for 8 years? Do we want to see the Havelock North situation established here? You are accountable for what your responsibilities are, and that is providing clean water that you can drink. And in this situation, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of people who rely on that lake to swim in. And at some stages of the year, it's not swimmable. On the other side, we've got government bringing to the nation better waters, and you're denying it. And waters are the heart of this community. We all know that. I just can't believe that you would turn your back on two such critical things. I've already covered the financial situation, but really, if the finances that have been put in place are lost, to the community, I think you've got a responsibility of saying, well, we'll take that up if they can't be put back in place. And it should be your liability, not the community out there's liability, to provide the sewage at the cost that they can get it for today. Why is that not reasonable? They've put the big effort in. They've got the money effectively. It's not you. They've got the money on the back of a whole lot of hard work. And then to pull that from underneath them and potentially make that, potentially lose that, I think that you've probably got to say, well, if we're going to delay the sewage for 8 years, well, we will guarantee you that it will cost no more today than it costs today. Otherwise, it's not fair. And you will have angry ratepayers. I've outlined those issues in my written submission, but I just really wanted to take an opportunity to address them because clearly the lakes are precious to me, and the decline in the Tarawera situation has been, as I said before, gradual and incremental. The other issue I wanted to turn to was the municipal sewage and the proposed contracting out of the situation. I just urge Council, as Kevin Winters has done, to seriously look at this situation. To me, it's core business to this Council, sewage, and that you should be retaining ownership of it. We've seen an effective situation established with our rubbish. It's a lot easier to deal with. But from my point of view, it now costs me double what it used to cost me to go and dump my rubbish. We've got a better situation, or a better service, I believe, but it's a lot more expensive. And if you want to go down the sewage path, I suspect that's the same deal. Ultimately, we'll probably get a service that's good, but it'll be significantly more expensive. In my opinion, and I've had a long time in business, particularly in the kiwifruit industry, people that provide innovation, once they have got control of contract, they are the ones who benefit, not the people that are effectively being contracted to. They see that as their benefit. So don't believe that you're going to get a whole lot of great benefits out of this process. And industry is one of improving innovation, etc. But as soon as you are not a player in that field, and you won't be a player, you won't have the engineering staff to be a player, you will quickly downsize your position. Inevitably. You can't run two structures. You become a taker. And if you're a taker, you just take. And you just got to be prepared to pay. So I don't think there's any great future in the process of being a taker. We've got a very delicate situation where we're putting our sewage system back into our lake structure, our lake systems. And that's a very demanding situation. Council have risen to the challenges of that, but it's certainly not a simple one. I'm sure everyone would understand that and agree. But don't believe it's going to come easy or cheaply. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a couple of minutes left. If there are any questions that any of the councillors would like to ask. If not, thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Means, please. Alan. Is Alan Means here? Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Means. Welcome.
Morning.
Thank you. You have 10 minutes, Mr. Means, so thank you.
Council figures in the proposal appear to indicate that the present sewage rate of $467 per year will increase to $514 under option 2 or to $566 under option 1, it being the utility contract in paying them $15 million per year over 10 years. Then we face a further increase in the future to fund the wastewater plant upgrade. Some of the wording in the proposal appears rather alarmist. Catastrophic failure, shock event, network performance failure, dire predictions to sway logical decisions. It appears the Council are keen to farm out any operation that involves challenges, and this leads to more rate increases. I'm uneasy about Council dealing with foreign company and the difficulty of negotiating around problems that could arise. I understand the utility contract provides for an average of over $5 million annually to be allotted to renewals of the infrastructure. The involvement of Fulton Hogan does not bode well for local Rotorua contractors hoping for repair or replacement work, except possibly as subcontractors to the company. At the presentation on the 16th of the month, reference was made to stormwater infiltration increasing markedly at the treatment plant during heavy rain. Be aware that this increase is not necessarily from the allegedly cracked pipelines, but mainly, hello, where's paper 2? Mainly from non-complying gully surrounds, roof water directed to the sewer, submerged manhole covers and leaking pump stations. My view is that Council should be wary of entering into contracts with a foreign conglomerate unless they have a proven track record in this country beyond Trinity's operation at Mangawhai. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Adams? Jared? Yeah, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mayor Steve Chadwick, CO, councillors, thank you for letting me be here today. This is an issue I'd like to address, and as I said, it is a privilege to be able to be here to speak to you all today. My name is Jared Adams. I've lived in Rotorua since I was 5 years old. This is the first time I've ever come to speak at one of these before, so I do apologise in advance if I say anything wrong. I attended both public consultations, and while I'm not schooled in how the council works properly, I do feel obliged to be here today, as many people don't seem to be here. I personally do not support the council going forward with the proposed sewage plan. I personally don't think that outsourcing this after 40 years of neglect is a good decision in any shape, way or form. We are the people of the community and of our area. I can understand getting professional help for something. I think that is definitely what the council should be doing if there are issues. But trying to outsource everything, I find a bit lazy and irresponsible, to be honest. I think there's just, the council was paid or, gets rates money to be able to make sure that everything is in the right way of how it should be. It's upkept. Money is spent on it properly, and that obviously hasn't been happening. While I don't blame this council for that, I realise this is 40 years of issues. So, the questions I do wonder about it is, if the sewerage system is in such disrepair or state, how come no one has been held accountable for this? Because I'd expect there must be some accountability somewhere. I don't think outsourcing this just because the government are changing their laws to being a great idea. All the elected councillors now and in the past are the ones who give okay to budgets. And after attending both the public meetings, it appears to me that just not enough has been spent on this in the past. I do think more money needs to be spent on this in the future. But again, I don't agree that we should be paying more to I'd like to see it kept in Rotorua, and just getting professional advice and having our own people do this is what I'd prefer to see. Obviously, the council elect are going to make a decision on this, and whatever that is, I'll obviously stand by it, because that is why we all have you in this position. What else have I got? The one thing that I do have a concern with this is that the sewerage, water and stormwater in Rotorua probably collectively should have more money spent on it for growth in Rotorua. I know the council wants more growth and more people coming to Rotorua, and that's only going to work if we have the proper infrastructure in place. As a business owner, we are expected to have the infrastructure in place before we put any buildings or before we expand, and I think the council should also do the same thing. The reason I've come to this meeting today partly is back in May 2018, while my wife and I were holidaying in America, our holiday park was shut for the first time in 20 years due to the flooding in Rotorua. While I realised this was a 1-in-100-year event, it did show that the infrastructure, being sewage, stormwater and whatnot, does need working on. And my worry with having a consortium take over the wastewater is, I'd imagine the big game for this company would be to take over the water and stormwater, because why would they only be digging underground for one reason? It would make sense if they had all three. And I guess my concern is that potentially in the future that all three of those could be subcontracted or handed over to someone else. And I just hope that does not happen and that everything is kept local. Again, I'm very pro on getting professional advice internationally from the geniuses around the world, possibly in Rotorua and New Zealand. And that's about all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I have the questions.
No, thank you. Justin Adams. Good morning and welcome.
Morning. Thank you for allowing me to express my analysis and suggestions in this submission. This is the first time I've ever made a submission, so please bear with me. For those of you whom I've not yet met, my name is Justin Adams, and my family have owned and operated Rotorua Top 10 Holiday Park for the last 28 years. I have been a Rotorua resident, homeowner and ratepayer for the majority of my life, and I speak today on behalf of my children who will bear the consequences of this decision. Infrastructure is the single most important function any district council provides to its residents, and well-maintained infrastructure provides residents with higher quality health, education, and economic benefits. When examining this proposal, it is concerning that 7 pages are committed to Proposal 1, which is the council preferred option, yet only 4 pages to the other 2 proposals combined. This shows an inherent bias towards that proposal as proposed to a balanced approach, which suggests a potential for a predetermined outcome. Ultimately, in my analysis of this document, Proposal 2, which is optimising the current method, achieves more of the council's stated objectives than the other proposals and achieves what most ratepayers would demand from a district council. Therefore, I support Proposal 2. Proposal 1 does not indemnify council from any of the risks involved, which negates any reason to accept it. On top of that, to do nothing, Proposal 3, would, in my opinion, simply doom this council to repeat the mistakes of the past and continue the common she'll be right attitude that will cost future generations immensely. However, we need to address the elephant in the room. That elephant being that Rotorua Council appears to have approximately $300 million of wastewater infrastructure in desperate need of replacement and appears to have no plan on how to replace it, let alone fund it. As this is extremely important, in my mind, funding could come from ratepayer infrastructure bonds. That's all.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
No questions?
No questions? No? Thank you. Is Mr. Gifford here? Oh, thank you. Of course. Thank you, John. Thank you and good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, councillors. Thanks very much for the opportunity to address you on this proposal this morning. I really appreciate it. As you can well imagine, this is an issue which is quite dear to my heart, the whole issue around effluent treatment and effluent disposal and the impacts that it has on our long-term sustainability as a developing city. My thoughts for this morning were to, perhaps not reiterate what's in the written proposal because you've already got that written. And I thought it might be quite good just to do a very brief summary and then allow some time for perhaps some questions and discussion. Because hopefully there is some discussion, because in the absence of discussion, one makes me wonder just how strategic the thinking of the council actually is. Just a brief introduction. My name's John Gifford. I'm a long-term resident, I suppose, perhaps not as long-term as others, but I have a very strong interest in the sustainable development of the city, and over the years I've been involved in a whole range of economic, social, environmental and cultural development projects in the city. And I guess the underpinning theme is all about sustainability and how we manage the long-term sustainability of Rotorua. The interest in this issue really stems from the fact that I believe that Rotorua is in quite a unique situation. We sit in the middle of a caldera. Every day there's a whole lot of materials come into the caldera, and it's our responsibility as citizens in this caldera to do something about those nutrients and resources that come over the hills and fuel our city. And we have to be innovative about how we actually use those resources that come into this town. And I guess there's 3 main thrusts to my objection to the current proposal, and that's really taking a long-term view. Those 3 main factors are, number 1, I think we've got to move from thinking about effluent and the sewage system and sewage as a thing to treat. We've really got to start thinking about it as how we actually use it as a resource. As I said, every day There's thousands of tons of material come into the city. Those materials are of value to us as residents, as ratepayers, as a community. And so we've got to move from the thinking of treat the stuff and stick it back into our environment as opposed to actually extract the stuff and use it for our own economic development and gain within the city. The second point that I make in my submission is really about reflecting on some of the research that's been done. And there is a good body of research on what happens when you outsource things like public utilities. And I guess the key thing that underpins that research, it says go into it with your eyes very wide open because there are fishhooks. And the fundamental fishhook actually rests in the fact that people interpret contracts differently. And through that difference, then ultimately disputes will arise. And there's the potential for disputes in particular where quality of service is a fundamental point. And I would argue that the quality of our effluent treatment and sewage system services in regards to quality is an incredibly important thing going forward, both in terms of how we use the resource, but also in terms of what's the cultural and long-term environmental impact. The third point that I make in my submission is really about cost. I mean, obviously, there's an additional cost by going down this pathway. It's somewhere between $700,000 and $2 million a year. And I just put on the table, surely as ratepayers, there's a much more beneficial way to use that funds rather than put it into the pockets of private enterprise and take it outside our community. Now, those are the three major points in my submission. I hope they're of interest, and I welcome any feedback and questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. Thanks for your submission, John, and you've raised some really interesting concepts in there. The first thing, and you're talking a lot about repurposing how we view our wastewater as we treat it. Do you see that if we do something different there, that's going to impact on what the majority of this contract is, or this proposed contract is about, which is the reticulation back to the wastewater treatment plant? So do you think that if we're adopting any of these new technologies, we are going to have to relook at how we reticulate back to where the wastewater is treated?
Phil, that's a really good question, because ultimately, as I hope I sort of started to allude in my paper, you have to take an integrated approach. And one of the fundamental issues we have in terms of dealing with our effluent was effluent flow. So unequivocally, you have to think about everything from where the source of the sewerage is in the system to how it ultimately gets through to the treatment plant. It's the only way that you can start really effectively introducing some of these modern and innovative technologies. So the whole system needs to be looked in a systematic way and in an integrated way. And definitely the pipes and everything that flows through it and everything that can potentially enter it is of critical importance into the long-term design of such systems.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, a follow-up question, if that's right. Also, I just wondered if you had any, you talked about the research that's out there at the moment. Do you have any feeling for the length of time it would take to turn that research into a viable commercial solution that could be used for a city's wastewater treatment, so of the size of Rotorua? You know, are we looking at a year? Are we looking at 10 years or whatever? And I'm just wondering how that would equate to this 10-year contract and also the separate issue of the upgrade of the wastewater treatment plant that we're in the Environment Court on at the moment.
Yep. Well, I'm obviously acutely aware that, you know, the city did delve into some innovative treatment technology a few years back, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, the TERAC system. But I don't think you should let that colour your view. You know, unfortunately, it was probably a question of timing rather than philosophical thinking. And I think that shouldn't really be an issue that really covers your view. The key question, I mean, basically these technologies, some of these technologies are available off the shelf right now. So if you wanted to implement some of these technologies, you can do it, you can start the process tomorrow. And there's probably no reason why they couldn't be implemented in at least within a 3 to 4, perhaps 5 year time frame. So the technologies already exist. There are some advanced technologies which are still in development phase. I would urge the council not to become a technology developer. It's not a good space for the council to be in. You need to find commercially ready technologies, but they do exist out there, and they will be expensive. There's no question about that. But if you take a long-term view and think about the quality of our environment and the importance and the revenue that long-term our environment will provide the city, the investment is going to be well worth it in the long term.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to John. I was very interested around your point around the effluent and use of it as a resource and the potential around the extraction of the effluent. Could you just expand on that just a little bit more so I'm clear in my determining?
Right. So, I mean, basically, one of the main constituents of effluent is carbon, and historically, what we've done with effluent treatment is, initially we treated it in a way that it dealt with viruses and bacteria, and so it was no longer a public health concern. And then we started dealing with the carbon that was in the effluent. So we added some oxygen and could actually break down the carbon so that when it went into the lakes and rivers, it wouldn't create a low oxygen environment. And then nutrients came along and we wanted to strip the nutrients. So we invested a whole lot of money to strip the nutrients. We don't actually use a lot of that. We use it in some ways because some of it goes into the biosolids, but a lot of it doesn't necessarily get effectively recycled and reused. And of course, the question now is well, what's the next phase? Well, emerging technologies are saying use the carbon in waste streams to replace the carbon we import in the context of fossil fuels like natural gas and oil and the likes, and use it to make plastics or other materials that we can use in our industrial and modern society. So there's a lot of things that you can use the materials and waste for, and I've just touched on some of them. I follow that literature very closely, and I know that there's a lot of emerging technologies that add a lot of value to our city.
Thank you. And a final, Your Worship, do you have a final question there?
Thank you, John. And the sustainability aspect is something that vexes us all, really. But you're talking about an integrated service redesign. Do you think we can really do that with the current infrastructure that we've got?
Well, I mean, probably the answer to that is no. So you probably do need some review of the infrastructure. But I guess the question I would ask is it best to have the long-term strategic development, which obviously you're wanting to retain, but probably ultimately you need the management. I mean, I just reflect on the way that our solid waste disposal strategy's gone because, it's interesting in our annual plan, we're having to put up the cost because the person who collects the material and said they were going to recycle it can't recycle it. So we have to bear the cost. Well, I asked the question, well, why aren't we recycling it right here in the city? You could easily convert 80% of that plastic waste into biofuels, into biogas, into alternative materials. To give it to a third-party provider is just ridiculous because their formula will always be around least cost to them, maximum profit to them, but probably, the community finishes up as the backstop and absorbs the additional cost. To me, that's a classic example of how third-party outsourcing contract can go seriously wrong and not think about how to effectively use resources locally.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation this morning.
You're welcome. Thanks, Chairman.
So we're running a little ahead of time, and I see Gerard, Mr. Hogan, you've just walked in. I don't know if you'd like to catch your breath, or would you like to come up now? Well, it is. Thank you. Only if we're a bit ahead of ourselves in timing, but you're most welcome to. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. And good morning to councillors. Right. Quite frankly, at the moment there are too many unanswered questions for people to go ahead with proposal 1, in my view, of this is with the sewerage. The analysis does not establish that contracting out is a proper solution to the problems or the issues with wastewater that have been identified, specifically those that are identified in the statement of proposal: an ageing network, growing service demand, increasing compliance issues, climate change, funding, finance and workforce issues. In this particular case, contracting out, I believe, is a solution in search of a problem. It's not the solution to a problem, it's looking for it. So there's absolutely no discussion in the statement of the proposal of how the identified contractor was selected. Did Trilogy come to the council with a proposal, or did council find them? And if council found them, how? How many others were looked at? What other proposals were examined? How were they examined? We're proposing to hand out a 10-year monopoly to this contractor, and I'm an economist, and economists never like monopolies. So that's the... we're going to pay a supposedly profit-making outfit to operate, renew, meet all the performance indicators, etc., of our wastewater system, and do this better and at a lower cost than council, a supposedly not-for-profit service organisation, can do for itself. I think we should ask ourselves why or how that's going to be done, and if you do that, you come up with the conclusion that this almost sounds as though it's too good to be true. And we all know what the next line to that one, if it sounds that it's too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. But let's suppose that they can do it. Well, how might they do it? Economies of scale and scope, they don't actually explain this in this case, so there's not economies of scale and scope that are sufficient to explain this. So what does? Council incompetency, in other words, you couldn't organise a piss up in a brewery, or is this just not true?
Thank you. Thank you. Just, yes, just modify it a wee bit.
Okay, then.
Thank you.
I'm sorry with the vernacular. It's not true is what I suspect is the case. Now, the devil is in the detail. We're actually not given a sufficient detail in the proposal to really make decisions. The SWOT, that's the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, or the risk analysis associated with the contracting out proposal, appear to me to be quite inadequate. Some risks are ignored or not recognised. Some, I suspect, are downplayed, possibly in an effort to make the case for the contract. We've got CCPI indexation for fees. Why? And more to the point, what is CCPI indexation? I'd actually like somebody in council to tell me that. I'm aware of the Consumer Price Index, that's the CPI, and the CGPI, the Capital Goods Pricing Index, but not the CCPI. As far as I'm aware, it doesn't actually exist. It's not an official index. So I'm sort of a bit curious. I mean, is it just a typo in all the material? And if it is a typo in the material, and council staff and people have vetted everything and checked through it, and it somehow slipped through for weeks, months now, what's the possibility that in doing the contract something might slip through too? But anyway, why index? Whose interests are being protected? The contractor? The ratepayers? What indices are being used? on what parts of the contract, when and why. Not all that the contractor is doing involves supplying and installing. I'm presuming that you're actually meaning the CGPI is the indexation. Not all the contractor is doing involves supplying and installing new capital equipment. There's also operation of the existing capital and consumption of goods and services such as labour and electricity. So you probably need a range. If you're going to do any indexation, you need a range of index for different parts of the contract, and you need to be quite clear what you're attempting to do with those indices. Labour, other than an offer of full employment to existing operational staff, and one might ask for how long, given that 60% of the critical staff are supposedly over the age of retirement. Apart from labour, there doesn't appear to be any commitment to buy local in this COVID-19 affected environment where we're being encouraged to be kind and buy local. Now, I guess because of my interest in sludge or biosolids, I simply can't resist noting that this topic in the buy local context. Where's the commitment in the proposal to the Kawerau-based vermiculture operation that currently takes all our sludge? Trilogy is required to make. Is Trilogy required to make a commitment to it? No. It can do what it likes, so long as it meets all current regulatory and consent obligation. And that leads on to another of my pet issues, the supposed advantage of full contracting out, that it gives the council access to expert advice, network modelling, assessment of growth and increased demand effects. The contractor will supply this. Firstly, I don't know that such advice is hard to come by, and we surely want access to the best independent advice, not just to whatever the contractor supplies. The council also needs expertise to be able to properly assess the advice that it's been given. We've been down this road before with my old friend Terex, where council was taking advice from the contractor or the other party and from independent experts that they provided who were not independent. And it's only taken the council 14 years to realise that it had a lemon on its hand. And I sort of feel strongly about that one because I realised it 13 years ago. I could also mention the claim that 2/3 of our network is in poor or very poor condition. What is or are the criteria for making that judgment? Age and age alone? I guess I'm in poor condition. And if it isn't just age, and the choice of network descriptors is accurate and not a pejorative one, how did council let our valuable wastewater system get into that condition? And what is now in place to see that that problem never happens again with this asset or any other public asset? Because that's the important thing. It's, and the next question, how is contracting out going to solve that particular problem? It isn't. At this point, the case for contracting out hasn't been made. Proposal 2, continued proper council management, would seem to be a far more compelling option. That option also allows council to wait and see exactly how the central government's Three Waters proposal develops, and then to make decisions about our wastewater system, and those decisions should be consistent and aligned with what central government is proposing. So, procrastinators, I suppose. In addition, by continuing to operate our own system, council helps maintain and enhance the skills base in Rotorua and the surrounding district. And it's also better able to ensure that any commitment around the system to buy local and or to ensure operational participation or community, cultural, environmental, educational involvement in those programs actually translate into something meaningful, some meaningful actions and outcomes, and don't simply become fine-sounding but ultimately pretty meaningless words. I'm open to any questions that people want to ask.
Well, thank you very much. You've actually used up your 10 minutes, spot on. So thank you very much, Gerald. Thank you for coming along this morning. I propose to take a 10-minute break now. Thank you. Check your phones, etc. And then we'll recommence with Dr. Stuart Gorson at 11 o'clock. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yes, you have 10 minutes.
Oh, thank you. And councillors, thank you for this opportunity to be with you today to make this submission. May I introduce myself to you as a ratepayer who has lived in this city since childhood. Through my adult years, I have worked as a chemical engineer in the capital-intensive paper industry and the interface with government, both nationally and internationally. Through that time, I have seen many contracts for significant projects, but regrettably, very regrettably, I cannot recall such a shallow proposal as this, not by a country mile. It is almost wholly devoid of any technical or financial detail that would allow its real review at the level that I have been used to seeing, and it's clouded with obfuscating irrelevancies. It worries me for all our sakes. What you are offering us is a statement of belief from a now thoroughly discredited political ideology. What the current pandemic and the global financial crisis before it did and taught us is that the private sector does not carry significant risk, not the level of risk that you are seeking to protect yourselves against with this proposal. We do know that the private sector will be very quick to privatise its profits, but equally quick to socialise its costs, whatever the wording of your contract. And currently around us, we have the very real examples of failed public-private partnerships. There's a transmission gully project in Wellington, and there's the related failure of the Wellington Regional Bus Service, where a well-considered contract failed in its execution. Beyond that, the greater issue of the meaning of standards of delivery, where we saw the delivery of inferior steel that did not meet specification to the Waterview Tunnel project. Can I ask you to consider for a minute, what if you do transfer your operational capability to your third-party contractor, and 5 years hence we do have the Kaikoura-type earthquake or geothermal explosion that we trust will never happen here? And you look to your contractor to start tidying up the mess, and he says, well, actually, this is a bit bigger than we thought. We'll have to renegotiate costs. But you say, well, we've got a contract. And they say, well, look, I'm sorry, we're a little busy in Africa at the moment, and we've got issues up in the Middle East, and we want the minerals from Africa and the oil from the Middle East more than we want our pensioners to come down and view your geysers. That's not a good time to be going to the courts. Now, some of the other submitters, the last two in particular, have given you considerable detail around the frailty of your proposal. My intent is to concern myself with the broad areas of its failure. At the heart of the contract, of course, are the costs of operating your network, of managing the risk, and of the profit the contractor will take. And what we really should be talking about is the cost and security of managing the risk, but you provide no real information on this, and it's not simply a matter of paying an insurance premium. So of the other two costs, because you consider yourselves unable to staff your ongoing management of the network, you're asking us, the ratepayers, to pay the annual profit margin of a foreign contractor to do this. But what has gone so wrong that you cannot get the necessary staff, and that you consider the operation too complex for the average person to take on? Isn't this your core business as a local government provider to provide the roads, take away the rubbish, and handle the wastewater? We've got 1 in 5 New Zealanders living overseas because they can't get fulfilling and rewarding jobs in this country. And this city, more than most, needs the professional and semi-professional positions that such work would offer. Really? You can't get the staff? It's hard to credit. Turning to another area of major deficiency, it's usual for proposals of this type to include examples of earlier successful activity. This provides confidence that what is being proposed is similarly likely to be successful in the present situation. But you're not offering any such examples, neither of an arrangement that has worked in the benign environment of no risk occurring, or more importantly, of how significant shock did occur and was successfully managed within the agreed costs. I trust that you have fully familiarised yourself with similar organisations who have had such partnerships previously and explored in intimate detail the issues that have been involved. Now, generally, this proposal takes me back some 25 to 30 years to the beginning of the 1990s, when the neoliberal revolution of the Douglas years was gathering momentum. This was the time when a new wave of management took over our industry across all its sectors. And they were very nice people, and they enthusiastically proposed that they too would contract out all their core services. They would look after the real management stuff like strategy and financing, but they'd contract out their core operations as you're proposing to do. Fortunately, they were prevented from doing this by those who knew that to be in the game, you had to have skin in the game. In other words, if you're really concerned about the effectiveness of your operation, about the quality and the standard of its detail, you have to be involved in it at an operational level. It's the fine detail in which an operation succeeds or fails. Good management needs to be alert to what is happening all day, every day. So in conclusion then, I would urge you to reject this proposal, to put it in the furthest recesses of your most distant archive. It is fraught with risk, and it lacks both financial and technical discipline. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a couple of minutes. Thank you. Councillor Donaldson. If you take a question? Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Mr. Corson. Through you, Madam Chair. Just on the issue of staff, recruitment and retention, could you comment on, because I know of people overseas who would love to come back, as you explain, if they could find the job that paid them enough. So the remuneration in local government versus what others have left this organisation to achieve in private enterprise. What's your knowledge of how the two stack up?
Well, there's pluses and minuses. But if you're asking a person to do a fair day's work at a professional level, I'm sure you'd find the ability to remunerate them appropriately. And I'm equally sure that if you go ahead with the contract, they will, within the structure of that, find the ability to pay such people appropriately. So I'd say cut out the middleman. But I would give you my situation that I've found fulfilling work and reason to be in Rotorua for my whole career is one of the most exciting places in the world to be. I think the right environment and the right employment conditions, you would have no trouble getting people back home.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming along this morning.
Okay.
Our Patricia Hoskins. Good morning, Patricia. Welcome.
Is this turned on? Yes. I'm Trish Hosking. I'm a farmer. I've lived in Rotorua for 40 years. I'm a registered nurse. I have a master's degree, and I stood for council at the last election. I'm here to speak against RLC's proposal that the sewage maintenance is contracted for a 10-year period to a consortium led by Beijing Enterprises Water Group. I need to say from the outset that it was concerning that the public were misled over the contract with China. We were told that this was a contract with an Australian company. I'm concerned that RLC is contracting out the sewage maintenance. Sewage, like water, is an essential service that should not ever be contracted out. The expertise should be local and immediately on hand if there's a problem or a major breach. I'm concerned that Rotorua Lakes Council has written up the contract with Beijing Enterprises Water Group and that it is ready to sign. I see this as also misleading the public. If there was genuine intent to consult and listen to the public, the options would be equally weighted. That is not the case. This has been an exercise in promoting one option only. It is a hard sell, the China contract. My reasons for speaking against the contract include the loss of local jobs. We are told that this will not happen, but we were also told this when the aquatic centre was contracted out. It's not believable. The 10-year term of contract is worrying. When it becomes obvious, like the iPark system, that the disadvantages outweigh the advantages, it will be too late and ratepayers will be locked into something they do not want and cannot afford. I'm concerned about ongoing sewage leaks. It is critical that we protect our waterways from sewage leaks and ensure our sewage system is well maintained. And this contract does not do that. There is a risk that the contract will be broken and that the contract partners will not meet their obligations. We are told there will be no surprises. This is absolutely misleading, as there can never be a guarantee that the contract will not fail. And this contract is between three partners in a consortium, between RLC and the consortium. If the contract fails, ratepayers will be funding the legal costs involved in settling the dispute. There's a greater risk to the environment if this contract is signed. We are told there are ongoing sewage leaks now, and we know that sewage poured into the lake during the 2018 flood. We know there is a risk of a major rupture, but RLC has provided for only 1% of pipes to be renewed each year in this contract. There are 450 kilometres of pipes, and 66% of those pipes need renewing right now. RLC must focus on renewing our sewage network and not contract out the maintenance. It seems to me that this is avoiding responsibility to upgrade the network, and it will guarantee the network, the neglect of the sewage pipe network for another 10 years. The cost savings by not contracting out the maintenance is $7 million over 10 years. That is $7 million that should be invested in infrastructure, not paid to Beijing Enterprises Water Group and partners. The money should stay in New Zealand with local contractors, with sewage specialists here in Rotorua. We are told the staff are near retirement age and that we won't have expertise in future. The pandemic has left many highly trained potential employees in our midst. Train them and keep the skills local. There are concerns that these skills will be lost to Rotorua and RLC will be locked into ongoing costly contracts in the long term if we sign this contract. This should be avoided at all costs. This contract is putting additional costs onto ratepayers which few can afford. We're in the midst of the worst economic crisis there's ever been. It will cost another $700,000 per year to maintain the sewerage if Beijing Enterprises, water enterprises, take this contract. This is at a time when we are told our sewage maintenance costs are increasing by $2 million a year. The cost escalation is completely unacceptable. The money should stay in ratepayers' pockets or used to upgrade the sewage pipes and stop sewage leaking into the environment. We're told that regulations are changing and that Rotorua Lakes Council will be fined for sewage leaks. That can only be a good thing if it motivates Council to do the upgrades that are long overdue. In conclusion, I do not agree that our sewage maintenance should be contracted out to this consortium led by Beijing Enterprises Water Group.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. No, I don't think so. No questions? No. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Milne, Rod. Yes. Thank you. Good morning.
Before I sit down, I'm Rod Milne, been around here since the year one, I think. I just wanted to pay respects to that police officer that was shot in Auckland. I've got family in the police. My son-in-law is a dog sergeant in Taranaki. My daughter was a detective in Auckland for 14 years. She's now unsworn but looks after court files North Shore, so I always used to worry about them. Okay, so yep, that's it. I'll keep this hat on because I get a lot of glare. I've been outdoors all my life. Thank you. What do we do here?
Thank you.
I've given you a good resume of me, so I'm not going to go through it again. I know this district better than all of you sitting down here. I've farmed in it, tramped in it, contracted in it, had businesses in town, and I know it. And I'm not boasting, and I'm not allied to any group in particular. I'm just my own man. Like my father, Major Ronald Victor Milne, was when he settled in the district in 1955. He's a veteran of Casino in Italy. So that's where I come from. Right. Now, no, hang on, let's see a proposal. Just now, Waka Forest. The spray area out there is a complete mess, and it's no good blaming previous councils for it, because I've had skin in the game out there tramping for a long time. I had contracts out there with the Forest Service and with Forestry Corp and Fletcher's, and they were bad news. One of those sort of, outfits that take over and then they don't run it how they should. After my daughter died in 2006, I was away a lot tramping with another friend, had a marriage separation then. But when I came back, I found, well, not so much came back, but I was backwards and forwards, that Waka Forest had been taken over by the mountain bikers. All the walk tracks they're all over the show. So a friend and I we decided to go out there, about 5 years ago, and we located a few old tracks. I took a machete out there and just quietly worked our way. We've got about 5 good tracks where the bikes can't get. And while we were doing that, we were up around the spray fields. And so we had a good look at those, because I can go into the bush. I've been a hunter, I've been whatever. And we found it wasn't operating properly out there. The sprinklers weren't working properly. They used to spray out there after heavy rain. You go out there the next day. So I tried to do something about it. And I went to a meeting, Councillor Donaldson called it, here at Ohinimudu. Just, any ideas? So I had a few ideas, but then Councillor Donaldson didn't like me ringing him, so he put me on a phone block. Not that I'm abusive, it's just on a phone block, but never mind. I've got a big hide. So I decided to get the regional council involved. And basically, we found broken pipes out there, we found all sorts of issues. Water running into the streams. I've reported that a few times. The thing was a mess out there. This is after that stupid thing was put in the paper about 2014. Oh, we're going to be out of there by 2019. You never show all your cards when you're in a poker game. And basically, so I had the regional council field officers. I had a meeting with your managers from the sewage treatment station, whatever you call it, and discussed it with them. I had that at the regional council office and went through a few issues, and they tidied a bit of stuff up, and then it sort of get worse and worse and worse and worse. And we were walking around the fields. We had our own little area, my friend and I, and we do 10, 15k a day out there. So, and in the bush too, not just up the tracks. So finally, Kevin Winters came out with me. I rang him. I said, "Look, Kevin, you come out with me, mate, and we'll have a look at this." And so we walked around one of the fields and found they've been spraying out there continually. You get a heavy rain like today, they'll be spraying next day. I put in here, like your tank on the hill only holds 2 days instead of a week like all the farmers have to. And it's basically been neglected. And you said you'd be out of there by 2019. Now, I knew that wouldn't happen. And also the council has the right to use those fields out there, which overrides that right you got to sign, we're out of it, So the fields out there have got life in them if they're maintained properly. And I had the contracts in that forest, mowing it with the Forest Service and stuff when I sold my farm and came to town. And the thing has not been looked after for the last 4 or 5 years. Don't blame anyone else. It's been shut down and it's a mess. Water going everywhere from them. And there's hundreds of thousands worth of infrastructure out there. The power lines were headed to service the little things that open the valves on those big, I don't know, probably half of you don't know what I'm talking about, but they've just put new power lines in there, or tried to find the old ones recently, because they had to stay out there. They had batteries out there and they were getting flogged, so they couldn't shut it all down. It should have had shifting it round into the new plantings. It absorbs better in small trees. They spray under the big trees out there. No wonder everyone wants you out of it. Trees falling over and that stuff. It's saturated out there. And I'm not talking about it going up the tracks. I'm talking about in the bush. I'll take you out there. And I know the bush. You could see around the line. No one ever been up to even look at it. So, okay, that's what's happened out there. And you've got to keep that one going and improve it. The poor guys working out there, I've talked to them all. Not many of them. They do their best. Not blaming them. Right. So that's the regional council. And I said to them, put an abatement order on them. And that would have meant 20,000 shovels handed to everyone in town to go to the toilet with. So they couldn't do that, but Kevin had a guy out there, I think, they looked at it and they put a small abatement order on one of the fields there and told you weren't allowed to spray there anymore. Shift it. Recently they've put some new lines in and I could take you all out there if you want to put a pack on your back. I'm 80, so you should be able to keep up with me. We'll walk around and have a look at it all. Much better than, talking here. Right. So that's Waka Forest. That's, this, by the way, this thing that was proposed, which you won't get it off the ground out here. A, it's on a flood zone there. B, the regional council won't let you. The iwi won't let you put it in the lake. You've got to look at other ways. If you can't work the forest over the long term, put in some field stuff, perhaps pecker or something like that might be agreeable to putting the lines in out there. Tramped all over pecker block, by the way. Now this proposal to shove this off, I'm glad this lady behind me brought it up about these foreign. I had good relations with Forest Service, Forestry Corp, and then Fletcher's took over. And then they put in Spotless Services, an Aussie company. What a total disaster they were. When I retired in 2006, I chucked it in, didn't have to be doing all this stuff. So you give it to a big company. When you give something, and I've run contracts, Peter Bentley's probably the only one around that knows something on the council about running contracts. I wish he was on board somewhere. Raj has got business experience. You've got to have it. And they'll take over the sewage thing. And then what's going to happen then? You've got to hand over something to someone that takes over a new contract. It's got to be going properly, all tidied up. That's what they deliver. It's a mess out there, so what are you going to give them? And, this scaremongering about Wellington, all that sort of stuff. And it's just been neglected out there for the last 4 or 5 years. Dunk, 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 like that. It's bad news. And I'm not giving you any spin. I'm telling you. And it's most important. And look at what happened to Auckland with all these water things up there. Look at Transmission Gully. That's a PPP. Put it in here as PPT, but it's PPP. You're dreaming. And I walk down every morning to have a coffee from Linmore through Neil Hunt Park. And there's a mess in there. It's run by one of your CCOs. They mow it, but they mow over bits of plastic and they don't do this and don't do that. I ring up all the time complaining about it. I used to have to do all that stuff on that contracts. They don't pick up rubbish in the gutters. Go out there now and have a look at it. Okay, so that's what happens under I know they're council-controlled organisation, but it's just... Oh, I don't know. Now, Sprayfields.
You'll need to start winding it up, wrapping it up now, Mr. Moore.
I will finish my thing, thank you.
You will need to. You're just coming on to 10 minutes.
I will finish this, thank you. This is most important. I've put a lot of time into this. I've been out there in the forest. Spent hours on it. I get paid for it. Won't take long.
Thank you for your presentation this morning. Your time is up, Mr. Milne. Thank you.
No, I will not. What, are you going to throw me out or something? I'm not being abusive. I'm telling you something. It's important. I put hours into it. I've laid it down here anyway. Have a good read. I'll take you out there, all of you. We'll walk around and have a look at it all. That's what you've got to hand over to a private outfit. Another thing, your drains in town, and when you let a sewage contract out, you've got to have water in. What's going to happen to that? You have the water in, they do the water out. There's no business experience around.
Thank you, Mr. Milne.
Yeah, and thank me for all the time I put into it over the years. Thank you.
Now, Mr. McPherson, thank you. Oh, thank you. She's not going to play it. Sorry. Thank you. Good morning, and away we go.
Thank you. I'm just waiting for my PowerPoint to come up.
Sorry, what was that?
I'm just waiting for my PowerPoint to come up.
Sorry, we've got your submission, and that's what you're speaking to your submission this morning?
But I'm puzzled by this because whenever anybody presents from council, they do PowerPoints. I simply seek the same option. And the PowerPoint's been prepared to summarise my position.
No, I'm sorry, I haven't received anything. There's no nothing.
Yes, it's been handed in.
All right, sorry.
Usual practice is that presentation.
All right, you'll have to speak to your presentation this morning. Thank you.
First, I regret enormously that you have people prepared to present using the same sort of facilities available to council officials, but are denied me. I think that's quite wrong. Anyway, I can present. It's,
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
11:35.
Mr McPherson, today you're a submitter like every other submitter, and we've given the tolerance of hearing your submission.
Thank you.
I don't expect any favours, and by the way, as a private citizen, I think I deserve the title Dr. McPherson. It's a hard one, title, and I'd like that to be respected. At 11:36, I'll begin. Kia ora tātou. I really appreciate this opportunity to develop further my preliminary position that's dated 17th June. It's in the pack. I will assume that you've read that. Now, in the weeks since that preliminary statement was prepared, I've asked feedback from the public, and this feedback has caused me to reflect quite critically on my preliminary position. 9 issues are now going to be raised and now offered to encourage further discussion towards achieving an informed public policy on wastewater management system.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Oh, is this going to continue? Is it more and more points of order?
We have received the submission. You cannot put subsequent points to a submission. No other submitter's done that. You must present just like other submitters. You can't keep it developing because of consultation. We received your submission. That's what we're considering. Please stick to that.
Thank you. Thank you for pulling me up on that.
I think that is quite a misleading position to take. Everybody's knowledge keeps growing as they acquire more information. I have acquired more information, and I have 9 issues that are causing me to reflect on my preliminary submission. So I'm speaking to my preliminary decision. And I wondered if I might actually make my submission without this barrage of interruptions.
Could you carry on, please?
Thanks. First thing I did not realise when I put that submission together was how divisive some people see the sourcing of management, and how they value being self-reliant as a community that owns its own responsive local government services. One person contacted me and said, why do they persist in corporatising? The whole motto of we together is being made a mockery of. The infrastructure, if maintained and developed right, will last generations. Therefore, borrowing money to improve, maintain and so on is far less risky than some other projects. This is core council business. At what point is it so outsourced that we don't need a council department? The second cause for reflection was that some people I found are deeply concerned about how the outsourcing of the management of our wastewater system will actually undermine progress across the council. One person said, it just takes away from local opportunities. These companies are more than likely won't employ a local to run their operation. They won't pay top dollar. That's how they keep their profit. Third, looking back, I underestimate the importance of links between internal capability, public accountability, effective government procurement, and the two-edged sword of profit. A retired builder said, outsourcing any publicly owned facilities are nonsense and only promoted by paid officials to remove their responsibility of having to understand, or indeed lacking themselves the expertise to successfully manage a business paid for and entrusted to them. Fourth, my preliminary submission failed to connect the dots between the limits of outsourcing management and the longer-term impact of COVID-19 on our economy. It's been well explained this morning, the nature of Trilogy, and its interest is to minimise costs and to maximise profit over the next 10 years. He points out that in a 5-year period, Trinity's net profit varied between 16.5 and 19.9% of their revenue. Taking our contract as an example, it means that between 2.5 and 3.1 million will end up in Beijing, Hong Kong, as net profit each year. That could stay in Rotorua to either reduce rates or to inject into the local economy. He says, I am pro-China, this is not my issue, I am pro-Rotorua. I'm seeing revenues and profits from parking, rubbish collection, construction contracts, and now STP going outside. With the demise of tourism, we should ensure that every last cent, every last dollar stays local. The fifth concern I have is my preliminary position underestimated the reputational damage being done to council. One person said, this is one of the few key services the council has to provide. Why on earth are they thinking of contracting it out? Contracting out means a company has to make a profit, which means the cost to the ratepayer will go up. Is it that they don't give a crap about the ratepayer, excuse his language, or is it they...
Chair, these are comments from other people. This is not Dr. McPherson's submission. I've got the submission in front of me. These seem to be subsequent comments. They should be ruled out of order.
Allow me to continue. Thank you. The sixth thing I was reminded of, I need to think much more about the potential permanence of the proposed changes, how they relate to the council's primary purpose, and the social contract that exists between council and our people. Because once that in-house expertise is transferred out to a third-party corporate, there is no going back. Seventh, I was reminded of the need for the comprehensive strategic evaluation of the quality of governance and corporate leadership that will be needed to support this outsourced management. And it's fairly astonishing that the council finds that it doesn't have the capability or capacity to manage the wastewater system. In building the system in the first place and then having to maintain it, the council staff must have built up considerable and valuable institutional knowledge. How can it be that by losing control of the system and the ongoing institutional knowledge in the process, how can that be good for the citizens of Rotorua? The eighth point is that I need to think much more about effective contracting in a long-term context, because it'll be very challenging to accurately define the scope of the work for the contract over the period. There will be, as others have pointed out, inevitably many unforeseen costs which will push the price up over the period, and they could well result in expensive litigation. Others have drawn attention to Transmission Gully. PPPs are really on the nose for good reason. Ninth, and finally, it was very helpful to be reminded that we're an innovative people and we are capable of accepting wastewater management challenges. This is not a complex piece of science. People argue that they do a lot of business with China and they don't see major concerns about the CCP being behind Beijing Water Enterprises. But it does mean, if you look at the numbers, this proposal means we'll pay them about 15.6 million every year, and they'll pocket a nice profit, as much as 20% before tax. Because the fact is that they are smart investors. Now, I can't accept that we have to outsource our basic infrastructure when we actually can do it ourselves. Saying we can't is an insult to our engineers and our operators here in New Zealand. My point here is that if we can put rockets into space, we can sure as hell process poo. That is the summary of my presentation, and it leaves me with these 9 issues. Just let me quickly summarise them. Does we together mean defaulting to local ownership or not? Will outsourcing undermine our progress as a community? Are capability, accountability, procurement and profits interdependent? Have we really thought enough about the limits of outsourcing related to the longer-term impact of COVID-19? Have we thought through the reputational damage being done to council by this proposal? Have we thought through the permanence of this contract? How will it serve our purposes and the social contract with our people? The quality of governance and corporate leadership available to supervise this contract, are they in place? Are they up to scratch? Now, do we need more detail to ensure effective contracting? The answer I've heard from many presenters this morning is no. And finally, do we have the capability to innovate in this zone ourselves? Thank you. I look forward to answering any questions to advance my learning. No questions? Thank you. Thank you all very much.
Yes, we do have two presenters who have not come along this morning. I know one might have been coming from out from one of the lakes. So I think I'm going to draw everything to the close now. I'd like a mover and a seconder, please, that our hearings be closed. Thank you, Councillor Yates, and thank you, Mrs. Trumper. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you, carried. Thank you very much for your attendance this morning. Thank you, Kia ora. Just